Hello and welcome back to JRTV here with another fun MLS video. If you've not done so, go ahead and watch the last one I put out, which is the MLS West predictions. David's back with me here. We're going to do the MLS East. So, of course, we're Orlando City guys. We are covering Orlando City with Loud and Proud Orlando. So we know a lot about the East. The West, I feel like I knew some, but I was always stretching to be like, oh, I got to research more here and know more there. The East, I feel like I got pretty good knowledge about what's going on over on the Eastern Conference. David, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, some of our Eastern foes might not like where we put them in the spots, but I promise I was completely objective when I put these together.
Wow. Okay. So I'm guessing that's referring to the number one spot. When you say that, David, you want to run us through
Yeah.
your 15-1 that's now on the screen?
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll talk about that. But let's start at the bottom of the conference here. Montreal and DC, I think were slam dunks for me in terms of what this looks like. I do want to give DC credit. I like what they've done so far this year. I'll go more in depth a little bit later, but I do like what they're trying to do in DC. But I think Montreal is very much a spoon candidate. So sorry to those folks in Montreal. Red Bull New York, your ridiculous name change, and you're not going to do much better in the standings. I have you at 13th. Toronto follows right behind in 12th. And then I have Columbus and New England just outside of the playoff line. I'm sure some crew people will come at me. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Going into the wild card spots, I've got Atlanta United having a bit of a comeback season. They make 9. Philadelphia drops a little bit and makes 8th. I have my very own beloved Orlando City at 7th, just outside the wild card spot. And then NYCFC and Chicago in that 5th and 6th spot. My top 4 is probably similar to a lot of people's top 4s, but I've got Charlotte at number 4. I've got Inter Miami at number 3. I can no longer call them Fort Lauderdale since they're finally moving to Miami. Then I've got FC Cincinnati at the number 2 spot. And then I've got the folks in Tennessee, Nashville, at my number 1 spot for this ranking.
Right. I mean, before we get to the elephant in the room and the fact that you didn't put Miami in number 1 spot, I'm sure they're gonna call us out for being Orlando haters or whatever in the chat. Don't worry, David has his reasons, so we'll get to that. Let's start from 15 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
Which teams kind of stood out for you there? Obviously, we said DC, Montreal. Not a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
Any other clubs that you got some interest in?
I'm not going to spend a ton of time on DC and Montreal, but like I said, I want to wax a little poetic on DC. I like the moves they made. Ty Baribo, bringing in Sean Johnson, bringing in just a lot of good MLS talent to try to like raise the floor of that team. I just don't think they have the top end talent to help bring them over the top. And I think that's what they're going to struggle with for much of the season. I still am not sure if their front office has a great direction. I know a lot of DC United fans and outlets have kind of said that a lot of the offseason they're just not sure what the direction of the club is and where they're going with it. And I believe there's talks about them, moving or changing stadiums or something about a 2 team. I don't know. There's a lot like floating around with all that. So I just think there's too much distractions there. Some people might think I'm a little low on the Red Bulls, and that's fair. I get that. I think the problem with the Red Bulls is they have shipped out a ton of people this off season, and the people that they've shipped out contributed a decent amount for them. They got rid of what some might call dead weight, like getting out of Lewis Morgan's contract and shipping out some of those people is great. But they just sold one of their most promising center backs like late in the window and don't really have coverage for him. So that'll be interesting there. And then like, Michael Bradley, this is his first year coaching at the top level. Obviously, he did well with Red Bull 2 last year, but I think it's going to be a feeling out period for him. I think he's going to have to understand the league again, but from a coaching standpoint, it's going to I think he's going to assimilate quicker than another coach would that's outside of the bubble. But from a coaching standpoint, it's going to take some time, I think, for him to kind of like figure this team out and bed in. So I think they're going to struggle a little bit there. Toronto, I put a little bit higher than maybe last season. I just think they have better talent than what they had last year. They bring in Walker Zimmerman. I still like the fact that they have Cifuentes. They're going to have, obviously, the full season of Mihailovic. So like all that should work out well for them. And I think they have some nice pieces building there, but I still think they're missing some high end on the top of the roster. So I'm just not sure that they have enough to really compete with that. Columbus, I like them, but I think they make a fall out of the playoff spots just because they have lost Wilfred Nance, who's done a lot of work for them and getting them to where they are. They've lost a couple of like players and talent here or there. They're going to have to figure out how to replace Nagby's production and sort of what he was able to do for them. So I'm curious to see how they fill that and what that looks like. But I just think maybe they take one too much of a tumble, but I struggled putting them between 10th and 11th, but that's kind of where I had them. New England, I like what New England is building, especially like the youth movement that they're making there, and then with their coach as well. I think it's a really cool kind of like thing that they're building and bringing all these like U.S., Y&T players in, all these youth nationals. I think it's fun. I just think a lot of it's riding on Carlos Heel having another like banger of a season and being able to piece all of that together. And I just, again, don't know if they have enough top end talent to compete with the East, because there are some juggernauts in the East that are going to give them problems. So that's everyone outside of the playoff line. That's kind of where I have everyone.
I think it's pretty good. I think there's most clubs are going to be there. We'll get to mine in a minute. Let's talk about 9, 8, 7, 6. There's a lot of debate, I think, in this part of the table for the East. Do you want to go through club by club, starting with Atlanta and 9?
So I'll start with this. Atlanta fans, you should thank me for this, because if I was a true rival, I would have put you guys in the basement again. But in all objectivity, yeah, in all objectivity, though, I think Tata does bring that bite back to the squad that they're looking for. Obviously, when he was here the first time, he had great success. Do I think it's going to be the same level? Not right off the bat. I'd love for. Not against us, but I'd love for Atlanta to figure out and raise to a good level with Tata, but I just don't know if it's going to be right now because of just all the contracts they have on and all that. They've got to get more out of Latte Louth. They've got to get more out of Almiron. They've got to figure out if they can play Almiron and Maroonchuk together, which they didn't really crack last season at all. It really seems like they added to the defensive side of the ball a lot of the offseason from the few Atlanta, stuff that came across my way. So I am curious to kind of see what they're doing there and how they're building out, but I still think it's enough for them to get one of the wild card spots. Philly, it's a tick year for Philly, not a talk year for Philly. And by that, I mean, every once in a while they have that sort of great season like they had last season where they just blew everybody away. But then I think this is one of those seasons where they regress a little bit just because they've sold a lot or transferred out a lot of talent. Blake's another year older. I just think they're going to have some answers to figure out, and I think they're going to navigate it decently to still make a playoff spot, but I just don't think they're going to compete in that top really 4 or 5 conversation. I think they take a little bit of a tumble. They haven't added as much talent as the rest of the East has, so I think they struggle with what that looks like. My beloved Orlando City, I think I'm on probably the more optimistic side than some of the other people. I'm not as optimistic as my other pal over at LPO, who has them 4th. I don't think they're going to be that good. But I do think this team, because they have shown us over the last couple of years that they figure out how to at least crawl their way into the playoff or a play-in game. Yes, the play-in games are not playoffs. So I think they figure it out enough to do that. And then if anything, I think the DP in the summer saves my prediction a little bit. And I think the DP in the summer puts Orlando City into a spot that's above the wild card spots, but they're too far deep to potentially compete for like a top 4 spot in the East. So that's where I have Orlando City. And as one of my personal things, I really just hope Orlando City makes home games a fortress again. Their home record has to get better. If they want to compete in the East, they have to have a better home record. We need fans in the stands because, boy, if it's a ghost town, that's going to be tough. Our friends, the Pigeons in New York, they're a decent team. They're always going to be a good team. I think even with some of their transfers falling through, I think they're still going to be a solid team. They get Tyos Magno back. I'm a big Tyos Magno fan. I think he's got the right pieces to be successful for them. So I really like what they're doing. They're going to really want to have a banger of a season going into their new stadium opening next year. So I really think they're going to try to put it together. And plus, anyone who plays them at Citi Field or at Yankee Stadium just has a tough time because of the dimensions. So I think they just still have that advantage for themselves, which For the rest of us stinks, but for NYCFC, it works out. And that's my 6 through 9 spots there.
I think there's some very interesting things that I'll wait for a minute till we get into those. But yeah, I think
Touche.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I think that there's other reasons that I'll talk about when we get into my predictions on those. The New York City FC thing that you said that they got a home like fortress just because it's so difficult to play in. Like that's definitely true. And maybe I should. Now I'm considering I want to change mine. Not considered that. So anyway, let's go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You've got all of these teams. I think are something valuable to talk about here. The top of the East is so tight, so it's really
For sure.
interesting to talk about all of these like top 9 teams here in the East.
Yeah, and for Chicago was one of my tough ones that was kind of hard for me to place. But I think Chicago, has enough talent, obviously, already on their roster. They've got Bamba, they've got Kuipers, they've got all these other pieces that really just kind of make them tick and really be able to kind of play the game they want to play. They're tough to play against. Berhalter's got them in a really nice system. They're obviously on the short list to have Lewandowski join them in the summer. And if they're able to get that over the line, this team could be even more nasty than it already is. So I'm really curious to see what that looks like. I feel bad for Kuipers because I think he's probably on his way out if they bring in Lua because it doesn't make sense to have both. But this is a team that I could easily see try to compete for the top 4 spots. But funnily enough, equally, I think this is also a team that could tumble a little bit farther down my rankings. Like if they can't piece it together or like they don't get Lua over the line and this team doesn't have the same, stuff. If Zinkernagel takes a step back a little bit or if he gets sold, because I believe there was some talk at the beginning of the offseason that people were interested in him. So if any of those things happen, I think they struggle a little bit and they might tumble. And their defensive solidity was very solid last year. Can they keep the same level of defensive solidity this year? That'll be interesting to kind of see how they operate. Charlotte, I've always thought Charlotte's a good team. I think they build a solid team. They're coached well. I believe their home stadium is more of a fortress for them than for other teams. So I kind of see them in 4, but they're another team I could see slide down to 6 if they can't get the top end to contribute. Like if Zaha can't give them more this year than I think what they need out of them, that could be a problem. They're hoping Toklamati can have another good to great season for them and figuring it out. Obviously, they got Pep Biel back on a permanent deal, and he's going to be doing it, but he's been banged up sometimes during his time at Charlotte, so they really need him to stay healthy and stay with it. It'll be interesting to see who they replaced their center back with because they sold a center back to the championship, I believe, at the end of last season, so they'll have to figure that out and what that looks like. So Christian Kalina, I think, had a bit of a fall off last year, so can he get back to prime Christian Kalina and like what he can provide there? Because they no longer have the depth and calendar, so it'll be interesting to see what that happens with that. All right, here's the one that's going to make a lot of people mad, especially the Flamingo fans down south. I have Inter Miami at 3.
I can
and
already
I think people are probably
see the Messi stands in the comment.
Yeah. So here's my understanding for this, and I think Miami fans will take the trade-off that I'm offering here. I think Miami throws away the shield in order to try to get the treble, if that makes sense. So I think they say, see a shield, we don't care. We want to go win CCC, Leagues Cup, and MLS Cup. So I think that's what their main focus is going to be on. And then the other thing too is that like I fully believe, and I know some other people don't as much, I think they're going to load manage Messi into the World Cup. I think Messi knows himself well enough to know when he needs to take off and when he wants to play. And obviously last year we saw him play more minutes than some people thought he was going to play. But I think this year definitely going to a World Cup, with a World Cup where Argentina has a good opportunity to win again, I think he's going to find ways to load manage. There's obviously all those tune-up games in March and in April, so like that's gonna get affected there. Their schedule is gonna get mucked up with CCC, performances. Post World Cup, they're gonna have to compete in Leagues Cup because I imagine they're gonna go deep in that competition as well. So I just think Miami throws away the shield in order for bigger competitions, and that's why they don't end up 1 or 2, because I just don't think it's a focus for them at this point. They want to get the bigger fish, right? They want to be able to go and compete in Club World Cup again, and potentially if the the Copa Libertadores works out, they can go do that. Or if they, whatever South American competition they can be a part of, they want to go and compete in those. And they want the worldwide acclaim versus the domestic one. So I think that's why you see Miami drop a couple places. FC Cincinnati, they're a great team. I like Pat Noonan a lot. I'm super jealous that the Cincinnati fans like have him, because if I know some fans are like, nah, he's got to go. I would take him in a heartbeat in Orlando. So make that move, and I promise you he'd be in Orlando City. But I think FC Cincinnati is a good team. Obviously, the partnership of Denke and Evander is just elite. They are just two really great players that are really going to give you great opportunities and really help you compete. And I think they've added some nice pieces, to that team. Obviously, our near and dear to our heart, Kyle Smith, is one of those folks that they added as a depth piece. So that's kind of cool. And then I have Nashville at top because I think their DPs are probably the best combination of DPs in the league. And I don't think that's difficult to say. I'd be curious to see what LAFC does, because I think they're one of the only teams that might be able to potentially, have an argument in that case. But they've got Espinoza, Surridge, and Hani Mukhtar, who are all going to contribute throughout the season. And I think they are going to be a very difficult team to try to compete with, when they're all clicking and when they're all firing away. They've still got a really solid defense. They have a really solid core. They're coached incredibly well by BJ Callahan. My only concern for them is, I know BJ Callahan just signed an extension. I still think a team might come in for BJ Callahan and take him somewhere else. And if that happens, I could see Nashville having some issues without the continuity, but we'll see what happens. Maybe, hopefully he hangs on for the whole season and they can make some waves. But they're also in some other competitions, so I considered maybe they don't get a chance. But I believe if they win the round that they're in, they go and play Miami. And I think that's where things might come to a screeching halt, because unfortunately Miami has kind of had their number over the last year and a half. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that ends up. But Nashville's my number one in the East, and I think they come in just shy of LAFC for the Shield.
Okay, so you got LAFC taking Nashville.
I think LAFC takes the Shield.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a big BJ Callahan fan, I gotta say. When he was coaching U.S. men's national team,
the interim job that he had.
I was like, give him the job, and everyone was like, no, boo, not this guy. I was like, dude, this guy's awesome. Why not this guy?
And it's funny that you say that. It's funny that you say that because I think he could replace Pochettino if Pochettino decides to go after this cycle.
That would be killer for Nashville, but great for U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, and I think that's a real possibility. And that's kind of my thought process, is that I could see U.S. soccer going back to him and saying, hey, you've done an awesome job with Nashville. Come in and help us run this team and do our thing, because Pochettino is going to go back to the Premier League or one of those teams or whatever, because U.S. soccer is not going to be able to fork out as much as he'd make for those squads. So
that's true. All right. Which team did you struggle the most on in the East? There's a lot of tough teams to place here. It's very, I always say the East is a bloodbath. I know I feel like it's exaggerated a lot of the time, but everybody does refer to the fact that there are so many high quality teams vying for those, playoff spots in the East. So did you struggle with that?
Yeah, I think the two teams off the top of my head are probably Red Bulls and New England. I think I might have put them down a little too far, because I do think they have some opportunities to potentially compete for one of those play-in spots. I think I'm putting a lot of faith too in that Atlanta's going to get that much better, because they were pretty bad towards the end of last year, and that I think Tata's going to turn them around. But I could see the Red Bulls coming out with Bradley and firing quickly if he's able to get them all bought in and on the same page. And then kind of a similar thing with New England of they've got all that youth. They've got a coach who really develops the youth and understands what they're about and how they can contribute. And so I could very much see me kind of getting some pie in the face on those two teams if they're able to kind of piece it together. I just think there's too many question marks maybe for them to figure it out, but they were difficult to place because I just wasn't sure how big those question marks are. And then the teams in the playoffs, I think Philly was probably the toughest one, because I just don't know how much of a fall off they'll have. I still think they'll be good, but I don't they might only slide 1 or 2 spots versus sliding a few spots like I had them slide.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think Atlanta, everybody's assuming, are going to be really good under Tata, or much better under Tata, right? And if you say that roster improves, then think they should take a big leap forward. But
Right.
that is assuming Tata can do his thing. I agree. I think New England, Red Bulls, you'll see in a second, but there's definitely some question marks about where to place
I
some of
think
these teams in the East.
one more thing, John, I
Mm,
think is like our own team in Orlando City.
yeah,
You
tough to
know,
place.
I picked them 7th. I think that might be generous depending on where we're
That's
at
very
now. I
middle of
feel
the road for where people have predicted us.
Yeah, I feel good with them adding Griffin Dorsey this late and everything with that, because obviously that solves a problem. And I'm not going to get deep into Orlando stuff, but that solves a problem for us. But I just don't. There's a decent amount of betting for Orlando City that has to happen as well. That like we need to happen in order to hit 7th. So I could very much see this team being 9th or just out of the playoffs as well if we can't piece it together. And again, like we've talked about on other pods, and other folks that cover Orlando City have talked about, if Oscar's below the line at the break, who knows what could happen, right? A choice could be made and it could change the entire season. So that might be one that I might regret having Orlando City at 7th.
And which team is going to surprise us the most in the East?
I think the consistency of Nashville is going to surprise people, because I think people think Nashville's good, but I think obviously having them in first shows a level of consistency that they have to have for the entirety of the season. And I think that's what's going to surprise people, is they're just going to see this team continue to just chug in and chug out wins, draws every once in a while, but they're really going to limit the losses. I think they're going to continue to make their stadium a fortress when folks come to play. And then I think the biggest thing is that I believe at some point this season, whether it's the first matchup they come up against, which is probably going to be in Leagues Cup, or whether it's later on in the season, they will figure out how to kill that white whale that is Inter Miami for them and find a way to get past them. And I think that'll be what really surprises people. And I'm sure Nashville fans will love to hear that. And so I'm glad I can give that to them. But I think that they'll surprise everyone in an even more positive way than they expect.
I don't want Nashville fans to be happy. I'm just going to say that. I'm not kidding. All right, here we go. You guys ready? This is my predicted table. Okay. From 15 to 1, we're starting out with Montreal in 15th. 14th, we got DC United. 13th, we got New England. 12th, Toronto. 11th, Atlanta. 10th, New York City SC. 9th, Columbus. 8th, Red Bull New York. Not New York Red Bull. Got that right. Charlotte 7th. 6th, Orlando. 5th, Nashville. 4th, Philadelphia. 3rd, Chicago. 2nd, Cincinnati. And 1st, Miami. So I feel like we got more differences in this one, David, than we did
For sure.
on the West. Starting at the bottom, Montreal. I mean, my boy Dagger down through Ralston. If you're watching this, Dagger, I miss you, man. Come back. No, I'm kidding. I'm happy for him that he's gone over to Montreal, but it is a team that is built with no money, right? And I think that's the thing. You can't. Where do you expect to be when you only have one DP and you don't ever spend any money on ADPs, and you just seem to scrounge around the league to pull players in that other teams don't want because they don't work out, etc. If that's your floor, you can only ever really be at the back, and I think that's an easy team for everybody to put in last place. Sorry, Montreal. Sorry, Dagger Dan. Please prove me wrong. I hope you have a great season. DC United, 14th. Again, like I think they have made some moves. I think maybe I'm being a bit harsh on
Hmm.
DC here compared to where like other seasons they would be a shoe-in to be down there. Maybe this year they've done enough, but it has been an overhaul, and it's an overhaul of a squad that wasn't very good. So like you're overhauling and you're relying on a lot of the new pieces to be better because the old pieces were so bad. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think DC I need to see them be good before I can believe that they're good again. Maybe that's a little
Yeah, that's fair.
harsh on my like
No, I think
maybe
it's
that
fair.
recency bias a little bit there, but prove it to me, DC, that this new version of you works. New England, I think I like a lot what you're saying about Mitrovic and all of the U22s, and this idea of creating a roster of guys that have all played together throughout the youth ranks in U.S. men's national team. I think that's awesome. But again, it's a lot of new pieces and it's a new coach. How quickly are they all going to work together? Have they got enough, in that roster to really be competitive in an East that is so competitive? And I think that's, again, we talked about this on the video over the West, but some of these teams are just down there because there's so many other better teams, right? So it's difficult to put New England, I think, high for me because there's so many other teams that I think probably will be better than them. But yeah, we'll see how they go. I think glad they moved on from Caleb Porter. Let's see what the version of New England finally look
Yeah.
like, right? Toronto still figuring out Mihailovic. I think they're going to be better, but are they going to be exponentially better? Have they done enough? I just don't know. I think the roster is a bit thin. I think they're still figuring it out, which I don't know. I think there's clubs that can do it all in one window, and then there's other clubs that seem to take multiple windows. And I think Toronto, like clearly Josh Sargent could be a huge part of what they look like, but I still feel like they need more in that team. So yeah, they're going to be 12th. I put Atlanta 11th. I do think that's going to make them better. I do think you're going to start seeing some of these pieces work. But again, they have got a lot of problems, and I think there's so many good teams in the East. I just couldn't pick them up, above the likes of New York City or Columbus or Red Bulls that we'll talk about in a second. So improvement under Tata, but I think the roster has to be changed more. I don't think Tata's got the boys that he wants to play the way that he wants
That's
to
fair.
play there. So I think that's going to be an issue for them. And so maybe he'll get them performing better, but I still feel like they're going to have to go through that roster shuffle. They probably don't want to hear that because they just did that, but it's the way it is. New York City FC, after what you said, I think maybe I should have put them higher because of their home games that they continuously seem to win. I just feel like they're a roster that's maybe aging a little bit and hasn't been revitalized as much as it might need to be. They also lost was Justin Hack in the back, who I feel
I think it
big
just
for them.
depends on what Maxi Morales can give him this year, right? Like he's another year older. He seems to be beating Father Time so far, but like, is Father Time going to catch him at some point? How does Magno fit back in? I'm just really high on Magno. I like him a lot. Yeah, so I'm just curious to see. Like, I'm kind of jealous. Like, Magno's a player I'd take on Orlando City, to be honest. But it's just I'm curious to see. I totally get where you're coming from because, like, do the pieces fit together? Does the aging stars still have the level to keep them competitive and all that kind of stuff? But I think it's also a benefit to that they have, Thiago Martins in the back, and then also they have what's presumably the one or two goalkeeper for the U.S. men's national team and Matt Freese.
That's
so
helpful. That's why I pushed them up to 10th. I mean, that might be low for you. I think I was looking at them over the likes of Atlanta and Toronto because of their consistency and because of the likes of Matt Freese. Paxton Jansen, I'm not 100% sold on in MLS. Like, I feel like he was good last year, but I want to see him like really take it up a notch with this team.
that's fair.
And also for just a size of market like New York, I really want to see more from them. I think, they need to be, look at what Miami, look what the LAs are doing. You could be that, right? So let's see that for New York, both New York teams. Columbus, no Wilfred Nancy. Is it the same? I think there's some elements to it being the same, but I think a lot of the reasons they were so good was because he developed that next man up mentality. So now that you don't have him and you have a lot of the next man up, does that work? I still think they've got enough about them consistency wise to be a middle of the road team in the East, which, when Columbus are 9th, I think it says, like, in other past years, you'd always consider Columbus a top team. But they've really, I think, suffered from the growth of the East. And maybe that's the same for Red Bull New York as well, because that's a team that a couple seasons ago was in the Eastern Conference Final. And I have them down in 8th. I think Choupo-Moting had a good season last year for what he is, but it's another year older. If he gets injured or if Forsberg gets injured, that's going to be detrimental to their season. And I think there's a lot of parts I like about Red Bull New York. I almost did it again. There's a lot of things I like about them. But I think 8th is like an absolute ceiling for me. And I think maybe now I should have put them lower. I don't know. But they're a team that I had a real trouble kind of placing because they do have a lot of consistent pieces, but I just don't know, if they're going to be able to do it again this year.
Yeah, that's fair.
I put them up in 8th, so I think I'm going to have some belief in Bradley. I feel like he knows the league and he knows how to do it in this league, so I'm going to trust him to be, of all the new managers, probably the one that comes in and has some of the best success, especially in the
Okay.
East.
Yeah.
Charlotte, I have lower than you, but I think just because, again, I think there's some pieces there that I have questions around. Like they don't have Pep BL anymore. I think a lot of the reason last year they were so good was him running that team. Wilfred Zaha is always just a massive question mark to me. They lost Melanda, like you said, in the back line. I think they do have a very good team still, and I believe in the coach. But I'm going to put them down in 7th. Orlando, I put in 6th. Yeah, I mean, we've rebuilt. How quickly that rebuild hits is key. How many of these new players that we've signed are going to work? How many of the MLS veterans that we've signed from around the league are going to quickly bed into Orlando City and produce in this new version of Orlando City? I think by the end of the year, we'll look pretty good. And that's kind of where I see us pushing up the table. I think
Sure.
mid-table will kind of be lower down in the playoff area. And then by the end of the season, we'll kind of do, I think it was like 23 where we had that crazy run at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And win a bunch of games back to back. That's kind of how I envision Orlando City pushing their way up into 6th, where it's literally the last few weeks of the season. It's so tight, and we just keep winning over teams that are also in the playoff race. So,
John, let me
I do think
say
we'll have
this
some
though.
struggles, though.
Yeah, let me say this though before you keep going. Charlotte does have Pep Biel still. He signed a permanent deal with them.
Oh,
So I don't know if that changes the equation for you at all. But
I meant last year they lost him, right? And then
yeah,
that's when
to
they brought him
injury.
back. So
Yeah,
he
yeah.
is here. Okay, that's good. I don't
Yeah.
think it changes the equation too much for me.
Okay.
I don't know. I have my questions around Dean Smith
That's fair.
as well.
I think they're
good. I just don't rate them as like a top 4 Eastern team.
Okay. Yeah, I think to your Orlando City point though too, in terms of them climbing up and grabbing points at the end of the season, I think the DP could do that for them, right? If they're able to figure out that third DP and he maybe doesn't like fully click right away, but clicks a little bit to like help the team, get to a certain point, that could be the help that pushes them to a 6th or a 5th, even if like this DP can come in and be effective. Because we know how much Ricardo Moreira is trying to find the right DP to add to the team. So.
And that's a lot of these teams, right? I think a lot of them are going to do something in the summer, and that I kind of looked into that when I was reviewing this of like, well, who has an open DP spot and who do I expect to actually go out and spend that money in the summer? I have Nashville in 5th. I totally agree with everything we said about BJ Callahan. I just think last year they just won games that they had no right winning at times. So I think they're going to just take a step back in some of the stats. I think I really believe in Sam Surge again. I do believe in Hani Mukhtar. I think Espinoza was a great selection to add into that mix. They could be even better. Like I did struggle with the placement of them. They could be first, like you had them. But again, I think it comes down to the other teams in the league that I just think perhaps might be ahead of them and therefore push them down the table, i.e. Philadelphia, who I have in 4th. I think there's consistency that they can rely on from the way that they built their team, the way that Bradley Carnell runs the team, the way that they just, are workhorse. All of them were like workhorses on that team, and they all want to put in a shift. So I feel like that is replicable from last year. Probably not at the same rate that it was last year, but I still think I think they're a top team in the East still. So I'm going to have them in 4th. 3rd, I've gone for Chicago. I think they will probably take one of the biggest steps up in the East. I think Greg is, regardless of how you feel about him as U.S. men's national team player, he has proven many times that he's a very good MLS coach, and they've added more pieces in the offseason. I think really only Bamba is the one that I would have question marks around whether he can be the
That's fair.
the key DP that they want out of their selection there. But like we talked about with Zinchenko, and we talked about with Kuipers, I think what they did last year, and if they can replicate that again this year, and you add even more confidence, another year under Greg, the fans are starting to get behind it. The Chicago faithful are starting to get excited again. So I really think that's going to snowball for them. And then I've gone for third. So I've that's really high. So John Rivera, if you're watching this, you're welcome, buddy. All the way up in third. Cincinnati in second, like you said, Evander and Denke, just an unstoppable pairing. They're just a team that is so well run, and last year seemed to again, they seem to get results that they didn't really, you look at the underlying numbers on them last year, they weren't that great, but they're just so hard to beat. So I think Denke year 2, Evander there year 2, they're only going to be better, only going to have a better understanding.
The addition of Barlow, I think, is a good one.
Exactly.
Like he just seems to know how to put the ball in the net.
They still have a third DP slot as well, right? Because they didn't.
I think so. I don't think they filled it.
Or they not? No, they use it on Mild Robinson, so they don't have one.
Yeah, so they don't have one.
But
yeah,
they've got a stacked roster, and they play the wingback system better than anybody, and they've got the center backs to do it. So I think they're going to have another great year. But I went for Miami in first. I completely agree with what you said about the World Cup, like being a focus for Messi and some of the other players on their roster, and the fact that they're going to try and win every cup and not necessarily be the best league team. But I also think that they spent double what most of the teams in the East spend on their roster, right? So I think that even when you don't have Messi in there, they've got a lot of good pieces. The likes of Bertarame, they brought back so many great pieces from last year. And they also fixed a lot of their defensive issues, which is the reason that teams managed to beat them last year, is because they didn't, they are defensively weak and they just weren't scoring in a game. And you managed to score, 3 goals and Messi only got 1. But if they were going to lock it up defensively with Dane Sinclair and all these money they spent on center backs and fullbacks and a whole new back line, essentially, I feel like that's going to make them way better defensively, so that they can kind of ride out some games, even if they don't have Messi out there all the time. And they've got so much attacking firepower that when he's not out there, I still think they can score a couple goals. So I think Miami, they've just spent so much. I think it's hard to not imagine them being good week in, week out. They've built that depth of roster, and that's going to be for the other tournaments, but it's going to help in MLS, because where other teams just wouldn't have that depth, they do, because they've spent so much on their roster.
Yeah, that's understandable. I just have a feeling that somewhere with all this switching and flipping around and load management on some of these guys, they're just not gonna, they're gonna run into some games where they're just gonna drop a game here and a game there, and it's just gonna be enough to not put them in first. Like, maybe it was a little extreme to put them in third, but I just think there's gonna,
they don't make first for sure.
Yeah, and so I just think it's just one of those things where, and again, we'll see what Messi looks like post World Cup, because at that point he'll have a lot of minutes on his legs, in the beginning half of the season. And I'm not saying that, he can't handle it, because obviously he's one of the best of all time, but it's just one of those things of I'm just curious to see, does he cruise a little bit more in the back half of the season, or be picky and choosy about which games he's a part of as that happens. It'll just be interesting to see what it looks like. And then you can't deny the talent of Bertarame or Paul or any of these other people, but I think the question becomes if Messi's not on the field to give them service, who is doing that? And is it enough on the wings to make that happen and still get to Bertarame if he's doing these things, right? And then with the defense replacements, can you say that their fullbacks are better than what they had last season? I don't know if you can make that argument on the top end, because Jordi Alba was a game changer for them, as one of the fullbacks. So center back wise, I think they're going to be more solid. There's no doubt about that. I'm really high on Mikael, so I like that move for them. But I still think if Falcone is the other guy, I just think that's still a weak spot for them unless they can address it, because I think he has his moments where he's not good. And so, again, that could be something they fix in the summer, and it's all mood anyway. But I just think it's something that, to kind of look at and see. And yeah, Dane St. Clair is going to want to come out with a fire, right? He wants to lock down that number 1 spot for Miami. So he's going to come out and try to do things. But what if he overplays it? What if he tries to do too much and it costs the team, goals or chances or whatever it might be? So there's just a few things that bang around in my head that could potentially, make that look different. So
I agree. I think I've just underestimated Messi before, so I'm just not going to do it on this occasion.
Touche.
And I think it was so hard doing the East. Like we said, I really struggled. Like I struggled putting Nashville fifth. I think that was really because I believed in the other 4 above them so much, and it was like I don't know if I can push Philly that far down. I think I think it would be harsh to completely underestimate them. Like some people don't even have them in the playoffs, which I think is crazy. Like there's always that team that we just don't see coming out of nowhere. Last year it was Philly. This year it could be like a Nashville, just leading the way, or you could have a Cincy leading the way, or maybe a Chicago leading the way. Like it could definitely happen. We'll have to see how the season shakes out. The club I think that's going to surprise us the most, I'm gonna say, this is hard. I'm gonna say Columbus surprises us by just not being Columbus. I think I think we're gonna see kind of them struggle. I think they're going to struggle to get up to 9th, right? Like I think they're going to have some time where they're way down the bottom of the table, and they're going to have to figure it out and start to pull it together. I think that's going to happen. That's kind of my prediction on teams that are going to surprise us. And maybe New England could surprise us. That's the other one if it all clicks there.
Sure.
And I'm completely wrong with 13th, and that all goes smoothly, right? I think that's what the storylines that interest me: Red Bulls, New England, the new managers with the same roster, Tata Martino in Atlanta. Does that instantly make them better? Does it solve it all? Does it, fix it? Or does the roster still have real problems? In which case, right, like in Atlanta's example, is there such issues there that Tata can't fix it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Red Bulls is another one. Like how different do they look under this other coach now that they've made that change? Is it the right roster? Can it maintain the heights that they want? So I'm interested to see these coaches in MLS.
Absolutely. Yeah. But like you said, the East is just a bloodbath. It's just such a hard conference to try to understand. And I'd love to see the West get into that eventually. I'm not sure what's holding the West back from, kind of being more of a bloodbath. But I think it's definitely interesting. But I think also, I wonder if some of these teams, and not the ones maybe solidly in the playoffs, but around the playoff lines, if some of these teams in both conferences try to punt for the silly season or like the schedule flip, right? Because we know that's coming, and some teams might look at it and say, hey, we're not good now, but let's take the next couple windows and build towards being good at silly season or being good when the schedule flip happens, because they know there'll be more eyeballs on them. So I am curious to see if some teams decide to do that.
I feel like I don't know if this is the case for Orlando City, but I feel like we're kind of like, okay, well, Messi's here, so now's the time to reload. Well, it's easier, right? I think maybe that's the case for some teams that just said, like plan for when he's done, like because it's so difficult to compete with that at the moment, and the Miami pulling power and everything else. Like I don't want to be so defeatist in that manner and thinking that way, but it does seem that rebuilding now and having a team that's had a year or two together ready for that season, when we make the calendar switch in 27, it is a good move because you're going to be more prepared as opposed to trying to make all of those changes in 27. So I know Orlando have done that. Which other clubs have made a lot of changes this offseason? I'm trying to think. Anyone else made like wholesale changes as much as we have?
I mean, Red Bulls had a lot of people go out. I don't know if they've brought in as much in.
Red Bulls
DC's obviously brought a lot in. Montreal's been trying to retool and pick up what they can and try to fix what they can. So
I guess, but there's a lot of consistency compared to last season. I feel like there was so much change in the East. I feel like
I
some of
think
these
the I
rosters are
think the
pretty
tactic
consistent compared to last year.
I think the tactic for Miami and like dealing with Miami is obviously the East teams want to beat them. They want to try to get ahead of them in the thing. But I think any team from the West as well is that like at this point, I think you just want to hang your hat on the fact to say like, oh, we beat Miami. And like if enough teams go and beat them up, they don't end up in high seeds or they don't end up making it in certain competitions or whatever. So like, the goal for them is to win as many trophies as they can in the big ones. So like maybe you focus on like trying to beat them up in those competitions and just trying to get the best of them when that happens. I don't know. It's just kind of a tactic. 'Cause, like, I know I get your point of like, let's just wait it out. When Messi goes, we'll figure it out then. But like, I think the other tactic is just beat up on them while you can. Just like keep punching them while somebody else gets them down. Like we could be credited with kind of the Miami turnaround last season where we went down there and just beat them wholeheartedly. And then after that, Messi's like, we can't keep doing this. And he turned the team around and they started going on that crazy run that they went on or whatever it was. But in league play, we had their number last season, but like a lot of teams didn't. They was on the flip side, right? They brought it to Nashville. They brought it to like a bunch of these other Eastern Conference teams. And I think more teams need to focus on, well, what can we do to try to beat them? Like LAFC getting a win against Miami on opening day would be huge, not just for them, but for the league as a whole to say, hey, we got Miami to start off not in the best foot. Let's go beat them up. So
I think last year the big surprise, like we said, was Philly. No one had them like predict Atlanta.
except we saw it week one.
Right, week
So
one.
we
And so
felt it
maybe
week
they
one.
aren't that bad. Atlanta, everybody had predicted like top three,
Hmm.
and look what happened there. So I always think about
Yeah.
that when we do this for this year. Like, are we all completely wrong about like New England? Are they going to be awesome maybe, or like are we maybe like one of these, like what team we're all sure are going to be great that just aren't great? Like maybe we're all sure Cincinnati are going to be great, and then they're just
Right.
not. Like maybe Evander's injured, and Denke has a terrible season, and doesn't get service or something, and like we just don't know. So I'm always interested in what that curveball team that's going to be. That just like, well, what happened there? Well, either from a good perspective or a bad perspective. So let's see what 2026 brings.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you all. Thank you to David for being our guest. David, tell everybody where they can read your stuff or watch your stuff.
Yeah, so I am graced to bless the presence with John and Luis over on Loud and Proud Orlando. We're going to 2 podcasts a week because we're in the middle of the season. And then also I write a slew of different articles for Loud and Proud Orlando on the loudandproudorlando.com site. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so you can find me at Fladoodler18. That's where I post all of my different news and thoughts and everything like that. So you can find me on there. And then also I'm one of the moderators on the Orlando City subreddit, r/OC Lions. You can check us out over there. We are technically the largest community of Orlando City fans on a singular site. So pretty cool. We've got over 10.5K subscribers on that. So we got a lot of folks that kind of contribute every so often. And then obviously when the season starts, we'll get a ton of people contributing on it. So we're looking forward to what that looks like. We also have a great place for game day discussions. We've got game threads, pre-match threads. We have a post-game sort of post-mortem with stats and then, ways for people to get their feelings out. So all kinds of fun stuff across there. So really just on all corners of the Orlando City sphere, minus Facebook. I tend not to tread into Facebook, but I'm basically anywhere else you can find me. Fladoodler18, you'll find me on there. So check me out.
I love that everybody has their social media limits. Where they're like, oh, that's for me. It's TikTok. I'm like, I'm not going to be on TikTok.
I don't talk
But,
either, to be honest, but Facebook is also a no-go
you
for
gotta
me.
have
So
something. You can't do them all. Be exhausted. you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
But
Or the 2 posts a year I put on Blue Sky, but
there you
it
go.
is what it is.
One of them's gonna get neglected, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you've not done so, go ahead, drop a like on the video. Like I said before, you can go and watch my other MLS content. You can drop a comment on anything we said today. Let us know if you feel like we got your team horribly wrong. If my prediction is awful, let me know. That's totally fine. If you agree with us, we'd love to hear that too. And as always, we'll see you guys next time.